Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today is a first-generation Latina. She developed her first virtual assistant company in 2017. As an operations strategist, she prides herself on designing business systems that help companies achieve a greater impact. Working with altruistic entrepreneurs and business leaders, seeking the path to create an organization with a shared sense of purpose that works better together, inspired her to create Operation QOL, a laser-focused business solution system. Please welcome founder, CEO, and operations strategist, Sonia Narvaez.
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm very, very excited.
Welcome to the show. This is awesome. I was telling you earlier when we first saw each other in the hallway that your LinkedIn is awesome. Like your profile, the messages that you put out there, you are like, wow. I was like, man, I can't believe she's coming on my show today. They talk about thought leaders, and I feel like so much of what you're putting out on LinkedIn is in that sector of thought leader, of like helping your business community understand what and identify their issues and then learn how to solve for it. And you put out so many positive messages and so many ideas, and then your pictures are so great. You're just always smiling, always happy. So I just love that. I love positive people, and I just wanted to share that your LinkedIn is just awesome. So
thank you so much. I have a wonderful team of experts that really helps me curate that, and in addition, take those beautiful pictures to spice me up a bit, and then beautify that language sometimes. But it's really all about that positivity. Because business is, and entrepreneurship itself is up and down, right? And it's really through that positivity and that support that you can kind of ride these waves as opposed to just crashing and burning.
Right. Just noticed that this was a little bit low, so now I should be better. But that positive attitude is contagious. A friend of mine just recommended a book to me, Culture Code, I think it's called. I'm not 100% sure what the name of it, but it's Culture something, and it speaks about there was some testing done, and this individual, the tester or whatever, right? He goes into one group and he's just depressed and upset, puts his head down, doesn't want to take part in the project, and so everybody in the project, while they were motivated to do the project, they start slacking, they start being like unmotivated and everything. And then in the other experiment, he is more positive, or there's this positive figure there, and then all of a sudden the positivity comes out. So it's so true, like in business, in the entrepreneurial world, on putting out that positive attitude. I think it's not shying away from the truth of that some things are challenging, tough, depressing, sad, identifying them, and then moving past that with a positive attitude. We were talking earlier before, and I forgot how I reframed it, but it was, I said something about my calendar, right? I said, I'm not good at blocking off my calendar, and reframing it into, which is true, right? But reframing it with, I'm getting better at blocking off my calendar. Yes. And that positive mindset, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is incredible because if that one person on your team is bringing you all down, it really is hard to keep going, to start to innovate and think about these creative ideas to solve these solutions.
Right.
Now imagine that being your leader.
Right.
The leader is negative. The leader is going, steering this ship in this dark storm, and he is just not motivating you guys. You're not going to feel it.
Right.
And that really has so much to do with that positivity, that being able to ride those waves, that feeling that your business is a supportive structure, as opposed to just being this heavy weight on those shoulders.
Right.
And each individual person, not to go back to the ship analogy here, but each individual person really, their attitude, their positivity or negativity can affect the outcome of the business.
Yeah, and we see that in a lot of businesses, and you see it. I think that we all see it firsthand when we walk into a small business where the owner is typically owner-operator. They're behind the counter. They're serving the meals, whatever it is, that kind of business. And there's maybe one or two employees, and you could feel it. And I think a lot of the times and correct me if I'm wrong because you're the operations person here, right? But I think a lot of times it's because they become so in the weeds of what the business is. And I think for so many of us, when we get into business, we get into it because we're passionate about something. And we don't realize all of the other things that surround that passion, which are marketing, if you're not a marketer, right? In marketing, financials, whatever it is, buying, purchasing, selling, all accounts receivable, all that stuff, owning the building, paying the bill, all of that stuff, client interaction, that maybe wasn't what you signed up for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting a business, you're like, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to do it. And then you're like, oh no, like my Facebook ad is completely losing money, or oh no, I can't interact with my client or get in touch with them and it's been several weeks. Oh no, something is happening. And you're not necessarily all prepared for it, but you've still got that passion, right? This is your business. This is your baby. And so there's a factor that's easy to motivate. When you have staff and you don't share your core, mission, your values, your vision, the staff don't know where they're going. And so it's really important that everybody on the team is fully aware of that. If we're trying to sell the best ice cream in the Hudson Valley, everybody on that team needs to know this ice cream needs to be the best whenever you're selling it to anybody. Did you taste it today? How's it tasting?
Right.
It's like we're all creating and working together on this vision to accomplish it and provide the best that we can provide.
I don't know if it's coincidental. I don't know what the right term is right now, but I literally just did a culture training for my staff
That's wonderful.
On Wednesday. So for all of you listening right now, Wednesday means nothing to you for when you're listening to this podcast. But it's within 3 days of this podcast that we're recording right now. It was 3 days ago. And the initial thought to putting on this training was actually because one of my producers, I have an insurance company, Den10, and one of my producers, that's what they're called, they're salespeople, but they're called producers in the insurance world. We like to be like we're on set. I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'm just kidding. That's not right. But they're called producers. So anyway, so one of my producers said to me, hey, Michael, while we're out speaking with other people about Den10, I feel like we need a script so that we can better share the message of Den10. And I said, we don't do a script. You have to be yourself. You have to be authentic to who you are and share your story and share what Den10 means to you with them. And he was like, well, that's cool, but what does it mean then, right? So I was with him on the phone for an hour, and he said, I feel like the whole team needs to know that. So what I did was I went back and I was like, all right, I'm going to put together a sales training. And when I started going through the sales training, I realized this isn't a sales training, this is a culture training. And I haven't done that with my team yet. And so what we did was I reorganized it, and shout out to Cecile Pepper. Cecile and I worked on this for a couple hours. There are several meetings on putting together this program, and it was all about Den10's culture. And in it was sprinkled in sales, but really it was about who are we as a company, what value we provide to the community, and how do you make that your message? So one of my team members, Jim, how do you make this your message? How do you take everything I just shared with you culturally about Den10 and it becomes yours? Because when it becomes yours, to your point, Sonia, is that when it becomes yours, it's coming authentically from you.
Yes.
And it's coming in your words.
And you don't with need your passion.
And you don't need a script anymore. And you can say the ice cream tastes like vanilla with hints of whatever, right?
Yes.
Whereas like I might taste it a little bit differently and taste caramel with hints of vanilla, right? Yeah. But it's your story, it's your message, it's authentic. So I thought that's just such a great example.
Absolutely. And it's funny because my operations brain just dinged a little bit when you were like, he asked me for a script. I was like, I love scripts.
You do.
I create my own scripts. But only because for me, I love that structure. I love knowing, okay, here's what I have to say, when I have to say it, how I have to say it, so I don't have to worry about anything else. However, I create those scripts for myself.
Right.
But it's based off of that mission, that vision. So what you did was you were like, let me not solve and put a Band-Aid on what they're asking me. Let me take it a step upwards. Let me strategize on how I can create a long-term solution for my company and make sure that each and every individual is aware of what this person may not be aware, right? Because if there's anything we learned in a classroom, whoever raises their hand is not the only one who has that question. It is just the only person who's going to be raising their hands to ask that question.
I love that.
So by you taking a step upwards and kind of creating this model, this training, you've now implemented this, I would call it a system in a way where you're saying, okay, everybody who joins gets this training. This is what it's about, our culture. Now let's take this and make it yours.
That's right.
What does it sound like for you? And then working with everybody to just understand, all right, how are you personifying this? How are you personifying this? And, insurance, don't quote me if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong, excuse me. It really is a business in where it's so much trust. And it's so much trust with that one person. So that person has to feel so much ownership of what they're selling and what they're doing. And it's that, think about Jake from State Farm, right? I know Jake. I don't know anybody else, but I know Jake. So it's like whenever I think of Denten, I think of, I think of you, I think of Carolyn, and I think of some of your other staff that are fabulous. But it's really that relationship and giving them the opportunity to make it for themselves, to make those scripts for themselves, to make that language for themselves, things that are natural.
I was just going to say that too, is that there's nothing wrong with creating a script. And you and I were talking about that with the speech that I did, right?
Yeah.
Which is, speeches are great, but the recommendation is certainly to not use a script. However, to script it first, create the idea, create the structure, as you said, which we're going to talk a lot about because that's what you do in operations, right? Which I am going to get you to tell everybody what you said to me earlier about operations. We're going to say that in a second. But there's nothing wrong with scripting. Is script it, but then learn that script, get the idea, understand what that script is about, understand why did you script it, why did you use those words, the concept of it, when we say structure, the logistical format of it, of like what came first, middle, and end, and then now turn it into yourself. Just be you, because we all know that whatever you wrote on that script is not who you are when you speak to somebody at a cocktail party or at a family event, right?
Exactly.
So be that person. Be the person at a family event, at a cocktail party, whatever it is. Take that idea of the script and start sharing it with everyone. One other thing I'll say to that, and then I want to get into that operations question for you, but and just for our listeners here, we are going to get into Sonia's backstory, but we just jumped right into this because we were waiting for the studio, so we had a lot to chat about, so we just said, let's just jump on mic. What I want to say about the insurance piece that you mentioned is I believe that trust that you're speaking about is true for almost every industry.
You're absolutely right.
I'm only saying almost as just to a saving grace of if there's anybody out there that has anything else. But it's if you're a marketer and you're doing marketing, if I mentioned Pepper before, I mentioned Cecile. She's my personal assistant. I have to trust her. I trust her with my logins. You know what I mean? So I think that anybody that's in business, and you mentioned this in your intake form with me about networking, anybody that's in business today, back then they needed it then too, right? But even today more so than anything, is building that personal connection.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, authenticity over the last couple of years has become a focus, a center. It's not just about, hey, I'm Sonia, I do this, this, and this. Michael, what do you do? Okay, great, awesome. And that's the conversation. It's no longer, here's my business card. Know anybody? That's it. No, it's, how are you? How's your family? What's going on with you? How can I help you? Getting to know these people, getting to know everybody, and really building a personal relationship. Because, when it comes to networking, the better the referral you make to that person, the bigger they will, the more they will trust you, and then the more that you build that relationship with that colleague, because you've just given them not just any client, but a client that fits. Somebody that will really, really benefit from their service, and not just benefit from their service, but they've just met another amazing person that they click with, because that is huge nowadays. I don't want to work with somebody I don't like. I think that used to be what they say in business, right? You don't have to like everybody. You just have to, be able to kind of stand your colleagues and stand your coworkers. Right. No, now, especially when you're an entrepreneur, when you're working with contractors, I better like you. Right.
Yes.
And if I don't like you, it's lucky that I won't pick up your business.
I think because we learned that no matter how good or skilled or talented somebody is, there's going to be mistakes.
Yes.
There's going to be rough patches. There's going to be issues that arise. And if those come up and you don't like each other and you don't get along, then they're heightened.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's where you have that like firing, or you have this contention between each other, or this really strange relationship with an employee or with a contractor, as you said.
Yes.
And that was true 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's true today.
Mm-hmm.
But anybody that says from back then, oh well, that's just the way we did business. But so many times you and I, we were around the same age. I'm going to put myself around the same age as you. She's a lot younger. She's a lot younger, but we're around the same generation, right? What I was getting at is people talk about our generation. I actually just lost my train of thought when I got into the age thing. I'm not gonna lie. Sonia asked me. She goes. This is great that it's recorded because we could edit it. And I'm like, we don't edit the show.
I was like, what?
So for all of my listeners, I just lost my train of thought, and that's it. So we're gonna jump into this. So
Okay.
forget about that train of thought. And sorry, I didn't finish it. So you're all screaming at your radios right now if you're listening to this on a radio.
I was like, do you know how many times that's happened to me, though? So many.
Right, but I think I was just talking about just a generational gap and people back then talking. I think I know what it was. It's so weird how things come back, right?
I love
was
it.
just that you hear stories about people where they like would blow up on each other and like storm out of offices and everything.
Yeah.
And as newer entrepreneurs, and you mentioned this in your bio about altruistic entrepreneurs, as people who want to give back to our communities in a way to where we provide service to our communities,
Yes.
And value to our communities, but
Yeah.
give back on a larger scale of like non-for-profit type of giving back as well. That's not harmony in our life. If I'm an entrepreneur, which I am, right? If I'm an entrepreneur who gives back, but then I'm having these contentious relationships with my contractors, there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
I'm not living in harmony. On one end, I'm like this sweet, beautiful guy, right? Nice guy. But on this other end, I'm this ugly, angry individual. That's not who we're trying to be as altruistic entrepreneurs. We're trying to live in harmony to where we have great relationships with our communities and we have great relationships with our employees and contractors, right?
Absolutely. I think in therapy, or not in therapy, but I think in psychology, it's called cognitive dissonance. When you, and I could be completely wrong, or I could think maybe it's a paradox. I'm terrible with the wording. But when you do something, but you're kind of doing another thing that kind of contradicts what you're doing. So it sort of negates it.
Right.
Or,
Right.
you believe, I guess it's not being in integrity with yourself, right?
Right.
So I believe that autonomy is one of my biggest core values is autonomy. And if I'm micromanaging my assistant, am I living within my values? And so it just kind of creates these clashing ideologies when you start to live outside of what you want your truth to be and your authentic self.
I love that you said that so much better. I got lost in that storytelling. But Merritt was on, and you know Merritt very well, and and we were talking about that, which leads to then imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Which leads to that feeling of like, I don't belong here. Yeah, because you're not living in harmony. You're not, So we're going to stop there. Awkward transition. One of the things about this show that I love that's different than most shows is we can have this like flowing conversation, but I love to get to know the person across the table from me. And something that I think you pick up on right away when you read somebody's bio or something is when they mention their heritage in it. And there's other things that they mention, but when they mention their heritage, it stands out because it means this is important to them. And this is something they'd like the world to know about. And they're very proud of where they are today. And so it's something to speak about. And so I would like to know, when you put in your bio, Latina, right? What that means to you, why it was so important to you to have that as a part of your bio. Because you could have just said, I'm Sonia, right? But you said Latina.
Yeah. So I was actually born and raised in the Hudson Valley area. Both my parents, my father is from Peru and my mother is from Colombia. They came over when they were in their late 20s. and met here in the beautiful area of the Hudson Valley, and thus a love created moi and my siblings. And to be very honest with you, I grew up in for lack of a better terminology, a very white area, a very rural area. There was only maybe one other student that was of a different ethnicity than us in Rondout Valley High School, which is where I went to, which we love the Ganders. So it was very, very different. So I grew up thinking, no, I'm just Sonia. Like, don't label me, I'm just Sonia. And then I went to college. I went to school at SUNY Stony Brook, and I was just blown by the diversity, completely blown by the diversity. And there was a lot of segmentation amongst the different cultures because of different sororities and fraternities and groups. And so it was a very, very different view of the world. And then I went to graduate school, and I lived in Chicago. So in, near Southside Chicago, in kind of the Little Italy area. And that in and of itself is incredibly diverse and very different. And that was a different exposure for me. And when I came back to Manhattan, I went to Manhattan, I moved there for a job. The city is an incredible melting pot. But there was still a bit of different cultural differences between the different jobs that I worked. So I worked in a low-income clinic, and the doctors and the nurses were very different than the patients. So what, to me, the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because in so many different parts of my life, it wasn't necessarily important for me to say something like, oh, I'm Latina, I get, I get this, I get that, this is what I hear. Because I've been very fortunate, to be very honest with you, and I haven't experienced that racism that some people speak of. I have met very respectful people in my life, and I am incredibly grateful for it. But that doesn't mean that I haven't seen it. And that doesn't mean that nowadays the reason I tell people that is because it is part of me. It is part of who I am. It is part of how I grew up. And it's something that I cannot oppress as I used to. Because, like I said, I just wanted to fit in when I was in high school, when I was in college, and when I lived in the city. I just wanted to be, a normal New Yorker, American, etc. But now that I really look at it, my personality, who I am, my background, it all flows and is part of kind of being that first generation Latina, and having that kind of temper and, being very honest. And there's things about me that are cultural that I didn't really embrace until I accepted that identity.
I really like the way that you laid that out. It's accepting your identity. I like that. I think that that's very important because you're right. We're very fortunate. I'm very fortunate in the position I'm in the life that I've lived, and same with you and what you just said there. But there are so many out there that aren't, and that are dealing with gender inequality, racism, all sorts of different inequalities, sex, all that different, everything that happens, right? Gender inequality. And so I hope that for our listeners, they can hear your story, hear what you're sharing with us, and feel empowered. Feel empowered about who they are. Because you're right, I think in high school, in our younger years, we're trying to find ourselves. So it's important to try to fit in and sometimes almost not be seen. Because like you said, like raising your hand in the classroom is scary. If I'm asking a question, I don't want anybody to think I'm dumb, and so it's really important to, as you grow and develop and experience new things, to then go back to your roots and be proud of them. And I really love that you are proud of it, and I love that you put that in there, because one other thing on that is where you grew up in the Hudson Valley and culturally in the area that you grew up in. It would be easy to just say, hey, you know what, I'm just a Hudson Valley girl, and
absolutely,
and I don't know my Latin roots that well, so I don't get to say I'm Latin, right? I'm Latina. and that would be such a loss, right?
Yeah.
Because you do get to say that no matter
Absolutely.
what, because you do represent your culture. And I think that that's so important no matter where you are or where you're from.
Women who don't match all of the qualifications on a job posting will not apply.
Right.
And so I'm just curious, how does that interact? How does that feeling of, what would it be, imposter syndrome, I think, right? Like carry throughout in so many different avenues of our life. I actually just thought imposter syndrome had to do with, being a business owner and being an entrepreneur. But now that I hear you talking about this, is that imposter? Like, I'm curious.
I think it does. I mean, like, I've heard that statistic too, and that most men will apply even if they have less than the credentials. But I think with what you're talking about, with race, with culture, with any type of these issues that we're talking about here, is I think that it does. I mean, I don't know how much more connected I would be to my Haitian heritage than I already am. I mean, I feel very connected to them because of what I do for Haiti and with Haiti and with my cousins, and I'm very connected to my Haitian family. But there is that feeling. I mean, I know, I can tell you two circumstances that happened in my life in terms of this that I could feel it. Was one, when the earthquake in 2010 happened, my sister, myself, and a friend of ours, Giscard, we all went down to the city for it was like a round table at the 4040 Club at Jay-Z's club.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all Haitians getting together to talk about what can we do to help Haiti. And we showed up. We have Forgotten Children of Haiti, which is an organization my parents and other family members started in 1993. And my sister, myself, Giscard, everybody had supported and been, I mean, we were selling raffle tickets as little kids and selling and doing all sorts of fundraisers and part of it. And so when the earthquake, we were devastated. And it happened on my birthday. It happened on January 12th. It's my birthday and my grandmother's birthday, who's from Haiti. And so it was a weird day.
Yes.
So anyway, so we go down there. And we're sitting there, and my sister and I are the only white people in the room. And my brother-in-law actually came, and I believe my younger brother, but I'm not 100% sure. So the three or four of us are only white people in the room. And the mic gets to us to help, and they hand it to Giscard. Giscard's black. Mm-hmm. He's Caribbean. And Giscard was like, I don't have anything to say. And they're like, well, you're Haitian. And he goes, yeah, I'm half Haitian, but I don't run the organization. And he passes it off to Marie Noel and myself, my sister and myself. And he's just like, they're the ones who run Forgotten Children of Haiti. They're the ones who organize it. And the room was like, what? And it was when we spoke and we talked about Haiti and we shared,
Mm-hmm.
then they acknowledged us. But we experienced it in that sense. Like, it wasn't diminishing in any way. Like, it just sucks sometimes,
Absolutely.
And then the other time was during that same time frame when we were working on raising funds to send to Haiti. I had a journalist start questioning me about where the funds were going. And I was like, it's going to Haiti. And she said, well, when have you been to Haiti? I was like, would you ask me this if I looked different? And, and I said, I was 9 years old the last time I went, haven't been back, but, it's not because I don't want to go back. I want to go back, but my uncle told me no. My uncle, who's a cardiologist and runs medical missions there, he's from my mother's side Haitian. He runs medical missions, and I had said to him, I said, I want to come with you on the next medical mission. And quite honestly, everyone, I love my creature comforts, and I am, I need to shower 3 times a day, kind of thing.
But
like,
that's why our family came here,
right.
for those things, for those opportunities.
And my uncle was like, Michael, you would be more of a nuisance than you would be of help. So he's like, no, you raise funds in the States, and we'll go and do the medical missions. So that's my story about all of that. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, and it plays into this idea, I think, of identity, right? Not just when I shared Latina, I also kind of wanted to think about, okay, well, that's a portion of my identity, but so is, entrepreneur, CEO, founder. And when it comes to operations, it's actually really interesting because when you shift from being a solopreneur, you shift kind of from being this dual personality of being an employee and a founder, right? So there's, have you read The E-Myth Revisited?
Of course.
Yes.
Oh my
you know,
goodness.
technician.
Read The E-Myth
Yes.
Revisited.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Over and over,
Michael
please.
Gerber.
Yeah, so, you know, there's the idea of being a technician, and I can't remember if he calls the other one leader, CEO, founder, but just there's two different identities that kind of pull. And so many business owners, when they move from kind of that solopreneur to then leading a team, they do not start to associate with that identity of leader. And it makes you change. You have to change. You have to change your identity in a way from being somebody who's in the weeds to being somebody who can have that 360 view.
And you're still in the weeds at that
And you're still in the weeds at that point. So you have to be able to compartmentalize a little bit. But, you know, so it's very, very interesting, this whole idea of identity. And, you know, for me, I'm an operations strategist. I love operations. I think about operations in so many different ways that people don't, that it's probably kind of weird. You know, I think of operations as like supportive. People think of operations as, oh no, processes, rules, you know, structure. Oh no, inflexibility. No. Operations is support. It's your care. Because if you don't have any kind of structure, you're going to be in constant chaos. Those cortisol levels are going to be up and your body's going to start yelling at you. You know, you're going to be like, not just your body, but potentially your wife, your partner, etc. They're going to be like, you're spending too much time there. There's no difference. You know, you become your business. And as a business owner, you're not your business. Your business is a separate entity and your identity is something else. It is leader of that business. It's founder. It's human, you know, it's Latina, it's Haitian, it's etc. So we really have to think about when we are running our businesses, what that means in terms of identity.
I love that you brought up the E-Myth because what you do has so much to do with that. And just for our listeners here, read that book. But he does speak about, he bases it on a story. I don't know if it's true or not. I believe that it's true because he was a consultant. So there's some probably truth to it somewhere. But he uses a baker. And she loves to bake. She bakes the freshest bakery items, bread, all that other stuff, right? And she just loves to bake. And so she thought she'd open up a business. And I'm going to make a long story short so that we can get to my question for you, Sonia, which is she opens up the business and then she learns, I got to deal with the finances. I got to deal with sales. And she starts hating to bake. She starts hating it. And what he starts working with her on is start implementing people who can help those processes in order for her to get back to the things she loves, which is baking. And so if you hire somebody who can be your accountant, you hire somebody who could be your salesperson, you hire somebody who could be your HR, now you can get back to baking. And in your case, you hire somebody to be your operations who could string that all together. And so it goes to what I wanted to ask you is, what is operations?
So operations, when you define it via the dictionary, just a straight cut and dry definition is anything and everything that has to do with, you know, moving your business forward, which is incredibly encompassing, let me tell you. Scope creep is real for me on a daily basis, but only because operations has to do with everything you just said. It has to do with, you know, getting the business to move forward, running it, you know, with the accountant, with the, you know, front, with the back, with the chefs. And so it really is someone who can not only manage all of those people, but it's somebody who can help manage you. You know, because what people don't realize is as a leader, eventually, you want to be able to be free to do so many things. You want to be able to be creative. You want to put down those technician roles, right, from the E-Myth, and then put on your like creative hat, put on your visionary hat. I love calling my clients these visionaries, and I refer to them as altruistic entrepreneurs, but really they're altruistic visionaries, people who want to do good things and have beautiful dreams for the world, who want to do more than just run a business, make a ton of money, and like service themselves. They want to really make a difference in what they're doing for their customers, for their clients. And so operations, you could end up doing anything from, you know, helping, you know, the administrative assistant really figure out how some technology works and training them, to then, you know, going towards annual planning with the CEO. It is anything and everything that has to do with moving that business forward. Now, one thing that you said that I want to point out, and not necessarily correct, but think about, which is you said you want to hire somebody to do these things. You want to hire this accountant to do these things. No, you want to bring people on who love what they're doing. So you want to bring on not just an accountant, you want to bring on an accountant who loves numbers, who's passionate about numbers. You want to bring, on someone for customer service who loves people, who loves the customer, who knows that they're first and will do anything to advocate for that person. You want someone to advocate for those numbers. I advocate as an operations person for the health of the business. And sometimes I think about the health of the entrepreneur because sometimes they forget that they need to eat or sleep.
Right.
So I give them back time so they can do all those things that they need. But I'm really here to advocate for the health of the business. So I look at, are the employees being as efficient as they can be? Are you being as efficient as you can be? Are we doing these processes and procedures? They're meant to be foundational. They're not meant to pigeonhole people to do things step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. What you said was incredible. You were like, I like to make a script, learn it, and then run from there. And that's what processes really is. It's that foundational steps to then kind of take it, make it more creative, ensure you're accomplishing what, the outcome is supposed to be, but do it in the way that you feel is organic, that you feel is natural. So what processes end up coming down to, right, are habits. So I have a process in the morning where I wake up, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, and, I get dressed. So that's my process. But it's not all done in that order. And sometimes I don't feel good. And we can't do everything like the way we need to do it in this step by step. So we mix it up a little bit, but the process still gets done.
I like that you said that too, because I was thinking about this other book, Atomic Habits.
I love it.
Right?
Love it. Read it over and over again. And the power of habit.
That's right. It's the same thing. It's what you just said is, my wife, I think, taught me habits more than anything, in that of she's got a morning routine, she's got a nighttime routine, and I fought it for years. We had kids, and I realized how important it was with the girls, with Denise and Tenley, on putting them in a habit. And I started falling into the habit of the things that she did, and my life changed. I mean, that's when I was able to start developing the Michael Esposito show, Den 10, all these. That's when the creativity was able to thrive because of what you're saying. The processes were there, so it's like a lot of those things went into autopilot now.
Yes, exactly.
It's my morning routine is autopilot. My nighttime routine is autopilot. I don't have to think about those things, and so life is easier. So I think that's great. And the other thing I want to touch on, there's a couple questions I have for you and everything you just said, but I do like that correction of looking for the person who's passionate about numbers and passionate about people. And I want to say that to add to that is, if you're hiring them, very important, and a suggestion that I currently use is hiring people, contractors, which we had mentioned earlier. So they're not employees, so I have an accountant, but it's not an employee, it's an accounting firm, it's the owners who oversee everything, because to your point, right, of being an operations strategist, is that they care about numbers. They care about numbers so much that they opened up their own numbers firm.
Exactly.
And they're the ones who I hire. And what I would caution people is just be careful of the people who just take a job at a firm like that. Is learn about them, establish trust with them, and understand, are they there to make a career? And it's whatever we're talking about, right? If it's HR, operations, sales, whatever it is. Are they there to make a career out of what you're hiring them for? So let's stay on the accounting to just keep it simple for everyone. So you go to an accounting firm, and you're going to have them from an outside look into your business and help you with your business. And you're not dealing with the founders, although I recommend to deal with the founders sometimes. Sometimes they're out of the business now and they're way beyond.
Yeah.
But let's just say they're in the business, right? If you're going to deal with one of their associates, if you're going to work with one of their associates, there's nothing wrong with that. but get to know them.
Absolutely.
Get to know them on a personal level. Find out what their goals are, what their ambitions are. Is it to stay there? Is it to stay in accounting? Because sometimes it's a stepping stone to something else that has to do with accounting, but isn't really accounting for your business. And that's important for you to know. It doesn't mean not to work with them. It's important that you know, because now you can plan around that. You can plan for what's next. Or maybe this is somebody you build a really great relationship with and they say, hey, you know what, my plan isn't to stay here, it's to open up my own firm. And you build a great relationship with them and then you go with them to that firm. But if their plan, if they're taking that accounting job because they took numbers in college and they just need an accounting job out of college, but they're not really passionate, like you said, then that might not be the right person for your business. And to be very cautious of that is what I would say to that. So very, very important. Mention a couple things that I think are really important because I've just learned about these words. Scope creep. That's a huge one. I learned about it.
Yeah.
It's huge. So we can't let that one go. So identify scope creep for our audience and how to not get into it.
Yeah, so scope creep is where, you know, you kind of are in this contract with somebody and you've said, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. So let's take it with a car wash. I am going to wash your car on the outside. I'm going to wash your tires. I'm going to wash the mirrors. I'm going to do everything on the outside. Scope creep is when someone is like, you know, the mirror actually has an inside portion. So even though the outside is clean, the inside isn't. You should probably do that as well so that it, you know, works better. You know, oh, well, the outside looks phenomenal. But if you look at the door on the inside, it's dirty. So when I open it up and it becomes the outside, all of a sudden this part is dirty. So, you know, don't you think you should take care of this? So it's basically having people, or going outside yourself, which I'm guilty of a lot. I have an issue with boundaries. I will not lie. I am working on them. But sometimes I tend to say, oh, you know what? I've noticed that your flower here, even though you've contracted me to do this set of flowers here, this other flower patch is making this one look bad. And I don't feel like my job is done well if this is looking bad. So there's just a lot with scope creep. But basically, in a nutshell, kind of what it is doing more than you said and are contracted for. And the issue is you end up being resentful because you feel taken advantage of. You know, you're like, I'm doing this is great. But as much as people are wonderful, what is that saying? If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want the
glass of milk.
Yes.
I've read that book a few times.
Yes, I love that book.
The girls love it.
I say it to people all the time because there's a lot of givers in the world and there's a lot of takers in the world. And sometimes without you realizing it, you end up becoming a taker. And it's not your fault, you know, so there's just a lot of things going on. So scope creep can be real. And the way that you can kind of overcome that is be as transparent as possible. One of my core values for my business is actually radical transparency. I want you to know exactly what I'm doing, when I'm doing, how I'm doing it. And that's why we have an action plan that I build out with my clients so they can look at something. Or we have a project management tool that they can see, oh, Sonia's working on this, and this. I'm supposed to be working on this, and this. We all know what's happening across the company. So, you know, there's this just transparency. And if there's anything that is outside, if they've asked me for something, have a very honest conversation. If you come from a place of honesty and authenticity, 98% of the time, it's going to be met with the same kind of form of treatment, with the same kind of respect, right? That's the law of reciprocity kind of thing. I think it's the law of reciprocity.
Yeah, you give something to someone and they give it back.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, you come to me with respect, I'm going to treat you with respect. So, you know, those are just two core things that I think everybody should be doing to avoid that scope creep. And also, the third thing I would say is to forgive yourself. Because I know I make myself feel bad more and more when I say things like, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that, I shouldn't have done that. because should, is the enemy of kind of progress in a way.
Mm-hmm.
It's the enemy of compassion sometimes. So that scope creep it can be real, and sometimes it's okay. I will say, sometimes if I've been contracted to water this plant bed and not this plant bed, but I can do it, I will.
Mm-hmm. I would say too, in what you just said there, I want to add there the should part of like shoulding. Another great way to resolve that for yourself is, again, reframing it into I could do this. I could do it if I wanted to do it, right? If I want to.
Yes.
And then that leads to what you just said about watering that other flower bed is if I want to. And realizing that when you do something that's outside of the scope of work, you're doing it because you want to, not because they're making you, because that's a whole other conversation.
Exactly.
But because you're saying, I washed the outside of this car, it's beautiful, but when I open the door, I don't like the way it looks. And I want to clean the inside of the door.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that for this person because I want to do that, because it's in my integrity to do a full job like this. Now, there's another piece of scope creep that we didn't talk about yet, which is that you're, as a leader now, you're an entrepreneur, and we go back to that baker in the technician, right? And you are a perfectionist. You're a leader. You're a visionary. You have an integrity of, I need to go above and beyond. And that's like part, I think, of being an entrepreneur, because if you don't have that feeling of I need to go above and beyond, if you don't have those visions or anything, then you're very comfortable just being a baker. Nothing wrong with that.
Not at all.
Nothing
not
wrong.
At all.
But that is why we jump from being a baker to being a bakery owner, is because I'm like, there's something I want to do different. There's something I want to, right? So anyway, if you're going to go above and beyond, identify what it looks like. And maybe that becomes your value, and that becomes what you say when you go to wash that car. You say, hey, look, I do above and beyond service. And I know everybody comes and washes the exterior of the car, but my value, my integrity, is that I wash the exterior and I wash the interior. And therefore, my price is X.
Exactly.
So very important, because as the leader, you're going to go above and beyond. So if you don't plan for that financially and your time-wise, then you're going to get stuck, and you're going to be behind in your time. You're going to be behind financially, because now time is money, and you're spending more time. So I love that you brought up scope creep, because it works in so many ways. It happens in so many ways to entrepreneurs, right?
Absolutely, because it is so natural for so many of us to go above and beyond. I don't know if you've ever done the Clifton Strengths Finder, but it gives you a couple of strengths that you have, and one of mine is kind of responsibility. And so I tend to take responsibility for everything that I put on my plate. And as such, it is only natural for me to want to go above and beyond on everything that's on my plate, which is typically everything. And that just leads to burnout. It leads to resentment, like I mentioned. And what you said is very valid. I do X, but with this other kind of component to it. So it's not X, it's X squared. And so X squared costs Y squared. It doesn't cost Y. But this is how it's different. And there's just so much more to that value proposition that people don't realize. And so it's important, like, just be communicative, be transparent.
It's so important too. You just reminded me of something else that happened recently with somebody else that I can't speak about, but they were going to lower their price in order to promote something. And that takes away from your value. And I know it's a little bit different than scope creep. However, you created value to prevent scope creep, right? So you created this value of, I wash the outside of the car and I wash the inside of the car. To say, you know what, I won't wash the inside of the car, but I'm going to charge you less. That diminishes your value. That takes away from what you have established. I'm not saying that you can't have an a la carte service of, we wash the exterior, we wash the interior, we wash both, and these are our different prices. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you're offering a value. And if anybody comes and says, well, I like everything you're offering, but can we just take one of those things away so I could save a little bit of money? Then they're probably not your ideal client. they're probably not your ideal person to work with. And to think about that, to really understand what I'm saying there, and that understand your true value is, I think, what we're getting out of this too, right?
Absolutely.
Understand your true value and never deviate from that, because the people that appreciate what you're offering, they're gonna show up.
Mm-hmm.
They might take longer to show up,
Yeah.
but you're gonna want to work with them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's incredible how, especially women, they diminish their value to accomplish what they believe, is kind of an achievement. So just to give you an example, I actually was speaking with a contractor, and I was considering hiring her, but I said, listen, this doesn't feel like it's aligned. I don't think we're right together. And she emails me back, and she's like, well, what if it's just $2,000 instead of $3,000? And I already knew right there that was not going to work, because it's not about the price for me in that sense. It's about the value that I thought she was going to bring me, how she portrayed it, etc. But the fact that she was willing to diminish that price also kind of said something about her. And don't get me wrong.
Right.
The struggle is real. Being an entrepreneur is not easy.
Right.
You go through hard times, you go through good times, bad times, feast, famine, and it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to be steadfast in that value. And if you're not, your time as an entrepreneur is going to be very difficult. Up and down, up and down.
I like what you said there too, is in the value of what she did. It's because you would pay that $3,000 if she portrayed the value that you were looking for. And I'll say this for this person, or any individual in this situation where they might have experienced this, that you might be at that $2,000 value. And so identify what it is. Yeah. So what I would suggest to anybody who's in a situation like this, that they put out a fee of $3,000, using this example, and it was declined. And let's say it was declined more than once, right? Then there's something there that's missing. Go back out to those people who declined. More than likely, they'd be willing to share with you why, as long as you're willing to be open and listen. Go back to them, find out what was some of the things that I was missing in my proposal, that I was missing in terms of my value to you, that maybe I can learn to cultivate and add to it, right? And then for now, maybe remove those from your, let's say, a la carte, go down to the 2,000 and build your way up to the $3,000. But learn why you haven't gotten that $3,000, because there's something missing there. I learned that because that public speaking is very challenging in terms of pricing yourself.
Absolutely.
And that was a public speaking coach had mentioned, that was, if you're putting a price out that nobody's receptive to, then you're overcharging for yourself. So you need to go to where the market is, understand what they're looking for in that other price point, and then start working your way up to that price point in your skill. And then put that price point out there, and as you start landing that, then you could step up again. But you have to be open-minded and willing to learn why you're not getting the number that you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But the same goes true for the other way, right? So if everybody is saying yes to you, look at that number again.
Right.
And you're on the other end, and you're like, okay, I'm not charging enough. We got to go to the other number.
That's
and
right.
No matter what, there is a level of uncomfortableness. I had a business coach recently, and I'm not going to say she made me raise my prices, but she strongly urged me to.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to, but it was uncomfortable. I was not comfortable charging what I charged for a while, and not because I didn't think I could bring the value and bring the support and bring the manpower behind it, but because I was never taught to value advising, knowledge, service like that. I was taught that the hours that you put in are what you get paid for. And that's it. We work 40 hours a week. I get a salary. I am here X amount of time, and that's what you're worth. So this idea of being an entrepreneur and charging more than you might make at a full-time job was very scary. And so I can imagine how so many people out there are undervaluing themselves. And they're getting all these yeses, and they're like, woohoo, all right, this is it. No, that's not it. That means we got to go up. And we got to have a system. Don't feel bad. After 4 clients that have said yes, we raise our prices by 10%. Or, you know, and then raising prices on clients is scary. So there's so much of identity and also just of mindset, right? And that's why we have people like Merritt who are wonderful to help us with our mindset.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with her in the past as well, and she's phenomenal. Yeah. So really just understanding, you know, that value is so important, but can be so, I don't want to say subjective, but it's so self kind of elective. I don't know what the word would be.
I don't know what the word is either, but what you're reminding me of is something else that you had in your bio, which I think is important to bring up at this point, which is the word ingrained in us is coming up in my mind of like our childhood, our upbringings, in the identity that we develop then in our childhoods, and then we bring that into our lives later on. No matter how much work we do on ourselves, we bring that on into our lives later on, and it comes out in all different types of ways. And something that you brought up in your bio, which is a pro for what you do today, was that you were labeled as bossy as a kid. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was incredibly bossy. So I, like, quote,
Are you a big sister, by the way?
I am a big sister, yes. I'm a big sister. I'm the oldest on one side of my family. And so, and actually, I have an older brother, but he's from a previous relationship from my mother. And I was the first girl. And so girls are treated very differently in Latino families. And boys are treated very differently. And so I was very adored for a couple years before my baby brother was born. And I was always very headstrong. And I have my grandmother is more of a matriarch. She's very, very headstrong. So when I was growing up, I was headstrong, I was stubborn, I was quote unquote bossy. I was always telling everybody what to do. I had a couple cousins and siblings with me, and I was the leader of the pack. You know, like, it was very, very interesting, because as I was growing up, to fit in, I became less and less vocal, less outwards, less, you know, just less, you know, for lack of a better word, just less. And
if you were a boy in the
if
Latin community?
If I was a boy, I would be the president right now of some country. Because I was willing to tell people exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do things. And
he might be labeled, and so let's not get this twisted here, right? Like that.
We'd be labeled a powerhouse.
It's not that boys don't get a label.
Yeah.
They get a label. They get a label of being a jerk and being, you know, headstrong and getting a label of being what's the other word that I used to get? Oh my goodness, I can't think of the word. But anyway, you know, you get that label.
Yeah.
But with that label is always attached, he's a leader. And that's where you were saying in yours, it's like, no, I was labeled as bossy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and even, you know, managers, female managers, if you think about it, a lot of times, oh, she's a bitch, you know what I mean? She's telling me what to do. But if it's a man, it's, oh, that's just what's expected of me. Right. So when I was growing up, I was labeled as a bossy person. And then I started to work more in corporate America. And I wanted to lead more things, but it still wasn't very well embraced, because even though I was a manager, I didn't really have subordinates or, you know, supervisees at that time. But I had a manager above me and then a director above her. And so there was kind of this level of, I wouldn't say bossiness, but just conflict, I think you could say, with headstrong women. And so it's really taken me kind of a time to step back and run this business to really realize, no, I just have the characteristics of somebody who loves to lead, who wants to lead. And something that is a really big misconception is that every boss, every CEO, every founder is a leader. And that is completely incorrect, because you have to develop yourself to be a leader. Yes, we have some traits. Yes, we have some skills. Yes, we like to be quote unquote bossy and run the show. But that doesn't make you a leader. It is your level of understanding for your staff, your trust, your humbleness, to know that just because you're the leader doesn't mean you know everything, right? just because you're the doctor does not mean that the nurse hasn't made a better connection with the client and may be better, or patient, excuse me, may be better suited to say certain things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's, I don't know if you've read Atul Gawande's other book. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's about checklist. So the Checklist Manifesto. It's fantastic. But one of the things that it talks about is how doctors and nurses, you know, how they interact in the ORs. And, you know, if nurses say something to doctors, doctors take it as them being, you know, bossy and annoying, and they don't know more than me because I'm the doctor. So it's really, really, the relationship is different. And I think nowadays, God bless, we don't even use that term bossy, or I haven't heard it in a very long time, to be honest. I hear leader, I hear manager, I hear headstrong sometimes, but in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think we're starting to recognize more and more, oh, they have the ability to be a leader. They seem to think about everybody else as opposed to themselves. Mm. And that really, you know, I'm really glad to start seeing that nowadays in the companies that I work with.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to say too, to everything that you're speaking to, is in being a leader, it's not just about, and stubborn was the word I was looking for. Mm-hmm. It's not just about being stubborn or being headstrong or anything like that. It's having that understanding of everything you're speaking of. It's having an understanding of everything. And you're so right in that not every CEO is a leader or is meant to be a leader. I mean, you just look at Steve Jobs, for instance, tremendous brain, great visionary. Absolutely. And everything, but truthfully not a leader. And I read his book about him. Yeah. Just tremendous, right? So, but he wasn't a leader, and it's because it's not that he didn't inspire. He certainly inspired. Absolutely. Right? Yeah. But how did he speak to people? Yeah. How did he interact with people? And that is where that leader comes out. And I love that you said that, because you can find leaders within your company. Absolutely. You can be the CEO, and the person that just came into the company, the person that is at a new level. So I'm not going to try to diminish any roles here. Any Absolutely level, not. Right? So you have your senior salesperson, you have your new salesperson. Using that example, that new salesperson could be a leader in your organization. You have to, as the CEO, this is when you realize, and this is how it makes you a leader too, is what their value is, their contribution, and bring out those strengths. Because they don't have all the strengths. They're new, right? Yeah. They're new to your organization. They're learning your culture. They're new to sales, let's say, using this example. So they're learning sales. But there's something about them that you hired them for. There's a strength that they have. And if you could bring that out in them, they can be a leader in that strength. And they could be the leader in the room. And they can share that with their colleagues. And I'll say this about age, is that age doesn't matter. All of my employees are older than me, significantly older than me, like 20 years older than me. Oh, wow. And they share their knowledge with me, and I share my knowledge with them. And I sometimes go, oh, wow, when I teach them something new, because everybody has value. And like I said, that leader can be a 20-year-old coming out of college that has great, crazy ideas or great, crazy passion, and just shares that with the team. And so they are a leader, and to acknowledge that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very, it doesn't come with age, you know, sometimes. It comes so much with your desire, your experience in terms of what have you lived through. And then in general, what do you aspire to? What is your ambition? I mean, I met somebody who had run a company. They were actually looking for a job because they were tired of running a company. They had just sold it. They didn't want to build another one. And they were just not a right fit for the company that they were interviewing for. They weren't that type of leader. We want people who want to succeed, who want to go above and beyond. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh, you have to work 100 hours. No, but to be there for your staff, you know, to exhibit this, like, leadership role, really. And I have a colleague who's maybe 23 years old. He's just finishing college. Amazing. Born to be a leader. He's rough around the edges. But it's like, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, age. It doesn't matter even sometimes what what degrees they have under their
Right.
belts, right? It's really, really about kind of this internal desire, ambition, and I think really humbleness.